if there is a deal to be done, it's going to be one that is of sort of a transactional mutual benefit rather than any particular joyful reunion. And there is something for both of them to be gained out of it. Rishi Sunak may well see a sort of bounce if he is able to kind of harness Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson presumably would only entertain it on the expectation of a safe seat or perhaps a peerage.
Yeah. Cat, first of all, I mean, do you think, we're doing a lot of talking this week about extremism and definitions of extremism because of Michael Gove's proposals coming out tomorrow. Do you think that this is actually, I mean, were Michael Gove's proposals to enlarge the definition to be put into place, this would actually qualify as extremism?
Well, I think we'll have to wait and see what the precise wording is, but I think there's no doubt that the debate around extremism, and also looking back a few weeks previously, that the debate about MPs' security is an important sort of backdrop to this story, and perhaps one of the reasons why it has ignited in quite the way that it has. Of course, we've also this week seen Lee Anderson's defection from the Conservatives to Reform after he refused to apologise for his comments about Islamism and Sadiq Khan. Again, ministers refusing to call it out as racist, saying it was wrong, but not actually coming to the sort of full level of saying it's racist or it's extremist. And I think that is kind of one of the problems that is really facing Rishi Sunak now, is this sort of lack of definition that he is offering in terms of what is acceptable language and what is racist language. And that may well be one of the areas that he comes unstuck on if the government does sort of push ahead with this new definition on extremism.
Reem, your thoughts? I mean, some of those comments really are pretty dreadful.
Absolutely. Those comments are horrendous. They are racist. And I think that it's really important that we call them what they are. I do also think that we seem to, in politics at the moment, value rash decisions being made by political leaders rather than sort of measured responses. And so actually, the fact that Sunak didn't respond and come out immediately after the media reports had happened, for some reason, people are saying that means that he's indecisive. That means that he clearly hasn't thought these sort of ideas through, and I think that that's not the case at all. I am quite concerned by the...
But sorry, Reem, if I could just interrupt you. I mean, how much thinking do you have to do to call a comment like Frank Hester's, that Diane Abbott made him want to hate all black women and that she should be shot? How much consideration do you have to give to that before you call it out as completely wrong?
Well, the point is that it's still alleged, and actually we're still waiting for independent verification on these comments. It sounds as though the evidence that we have at the moment is relatively accurate.
I think Frank Hester's actually apologised for them, so that would suggest that he made the comment.
Yes, but this is exactly the case, right? We seem to, in politics at the moment, and look, I think that it's very important that we call out racism when we see it. Frank Hester did apologise. Now, I think his comments were absolutely horrendous. I think the Conservative Party were right to come out, and Prime Minister Rishi Sunak coming out and responding. I think it also makes Kemi Badenoch look quite good in that she came out before the Prime Minister had in condemning these comments. But I think that we need to stop thinking that actually immediate responses to things are somehow better and somehow more decisive. I actually think measured responses to these ideas are more important. I cast our mind back to Lee Anderson when he had the whip removed. People were saying it took too long. I actually think that having measured responses to these kind of issues are really important.
I understand, but it seems that there's very little ambiguity about those comments. And I wonder, Cat, what your thought was in terms of, whether, I mean, I don't know, if a leader of some other group were to come out with comments like that, saying, talking about hating women, black or not, and that a particular person should be shot. I mean, that actually is a sort of incitement to violence, is it not? I mean, I just wonder if Frank Hester's been treated differently because he's a £10 million Tory donor.
Yeah, I mean, I think I completely disagree with Reem, I have to say. I mean, I think if you only have to look at what happened with Rochdale and the Labour candidate there to see all of the criticism that was levelled at Keir Starmer for not having acted quicker and removing the Labour support for his candidacy in the by-election in Rochdale for comments that were, again, clearly inappropriate, sort of anti-Semitic tropes being invoked in that. I think on the face of it, these comments are obviously racist. And I think that the fact that we have had ministers come out on the day one, not defending the comments, but refusing to describe them as racist. And then it took until Kemi Badenoch stated that they were racist for Number 10 to actually catch up, I think shows, again, this kind of lack of political definition. In terms of the sort of incitement to hatred, I think that's absolutely right, Mariella. I mean, we are talking about a man who is so comfortable with this kind of language that he's openly speculating about shooting an MP. Or, we've had 2 MPs killed in the last 10 years, and MPs receive death threats regularly. Diane Abbott probably a disproportionate amount. So the fact that this has been normalised to the point where a business leader is comfortable enough expressing that opinion in front of his staff shows just how toxic things have become. And I think that we can argue, well, it's just words and so on, but it does have a direct effect on our democracy. The reason why several MPs stood down in 2019 was because of the scale of death threats that they started to receive around that very, very toxic environment in the sort of fallout of Brexit. And again, we are seeing MPs standing down because of death threats. Mike Fear has said that the reason why he is standing down explicitly is because of the death threats that he has received in response to the Israel-Gaza situation. We have to recognise that this kind of language, whether it's someone talking about shooting an MP or whether it's people actually going and sort of daubing MPs' offices or kind of making
the intimidation in general,
emails, it has an impact on democracy. It's not just about sort of coddling MPs. It means that fewer people, good people, are going to stand as MPs.
Well, of course, these comments, or at least the most strenuous ones, were about Diane Abbott. And Mike from Tyneside has been in touch saying, has the Speaker done another deal with Starmer by not calling on Diane Abbott to speak to avoid potential embarrassment? And it is true that Diane Abbott was trying to be called throughout PMQs this morning while others spoke about her. But Speaker Sir Lindsay Hoyle never chose her. What's your thought on that, Reem?
Yes, I think it's interesting. I mean, with PMQs today, the way in which the Speaker didn't call on Diane Abbott, whether or not the question is about whether she should be reinstated in the Labour Party. These are different questions that are being floated about. The truth of the answer is we just don't know if that is going to happen, if that is a possibility. But let's also remember why Diane Abbott had the whip removed in the first place. She came up with an article in The Observer effectively saying that anti-Semitism is no worse than a ginger kid being bullied in the playground. So, look, I mean...
But that doesn't make it okay, does it?
No.
Two wrongs don't make a right.
Absolutely, and that's exactly the point.
There are plenty of independent MPs that get a say in PMQs and other places.
I'm not saying that that's the reason why she shouldn't be called on PMQ. She's still representative of her constituents and should absolutely have the right to speak in Parliament. My point is that when it comes to Frank Hester's comments, which were absolutely horrendous, I want to make that point and make that very clear, horrendous and racist and absolutely should not have been said. And then also Diane Abbott has said some pretty horrendous things too. Actually, I think that across the board, when we're talking about the way in which people are apologising and the way in which we seem to be so rash and wanting to cancel people, look, I mean, should the Conservative Party accept more money from Frank Hester? Probably not. But actually giving that money back to him would just be a reward for those horrendous comments.
But it certainly doesn't help, I think, voters' impression of what politicians are all about. And,
yes.
In a year where we're coming up to an election, I mean, there's something really distasteful about the whole business. Let's move on to another big headline of the week, and also a headline in the Times today. Boris isn't done. Is that a threat or a promise, do you think, Cat Neilan?
That is a very good way of framing it, and I'm sure that there will be some in and around Rishi Sunak's circle who do see it as a threat. Look, I mean, this Boris comeback has been one of those stories that sort of floats about ever since he left. Really, he's the guy that the Tories just can't quit. But there is clearly a concern within the Sunak camp that he doesn't connect with voters, particularly in the red wall. And there has been this suggestion that Boris Johnson could come back and could do that. I think it's interesting that there is this kind of discrepancy over sort of the scale of the thawing of relationship. And the article in the Times does kind of make clear that although they're not speaking or meeting, they've been exchanging WhatsApps, hopefully ones that don't get deleted anytime soon. But I think look, it's clearly, if there is a deal to be done, it's going to be one that is of sort of a transactional mutual benefit rather than any particular joyful reunion. And there is something for both of them to be gained out of it. Rishi Sunak may well see a sort of bounce if he is able to kind of harness Boris Johnson. Boris Johnson presumably would only entertain it on the expectation of a safe seat or perhaps a peerage.
Yeah,
like his long-time frenemy David Cameron managed to get.
Reem, let me bring you in. Nadine Dorries, obviously a Johnson loyalist, claims that Rishi Sunak panic-placed the story about Boris campaigning. What are your thoughts, threat or promise?
Well, threat or promise. I suspect actually a bit of both. I think maybe from Johnson's perspective. I mean, look, he did win a resounding majority for the Conservative Party. There is no doubt about the fact that he is an excellent communicator and an excellent campaigner. Does that mean that he is an ideological Puritan that someone like me would want to see in the party? No. Is he the kind of person that would lead the party into a pretty successful general election? Potentially, and he has a proven track record for that. I think what's interesting is this kind of power play between Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson. Sunak was his chancellor throughout the pandemic and throughout a lot of these key decisions when they were being made. And actually, I think it's really interesting the way their relationship has developed. Whether or not Johnson wants something out of it, I think that we're absolutely right here that actually probably is expecting a peerage or maybe even a safe seat. I suspect it's probably the former and not the latter.